Thank you again for joining us and good evening to everybody. Daniel, welcome especially. Daniel Hinkley is a teacher, writer, lecturer, consultant, nurseryman, naturalist and gardener. That's a long list of impressive qualifications. He's travelled the globe on his plant hunting expeditions and is author of 4 books, recognised by his peers with numerous awards. These include the Liberty Hyde Bailey Award from the American Horticultural Society, the Veitch Memorial Medal from the Royal Horticultural Society, and the Scott Gold Medal from the Scott Arboretum. Above all, Daniel is committed to solid and sustainable horticultural practices, to using above-average garden plants, to exploring landscapes of distinction and raising the collective awareness of the diversity of plant life on Earth, as well as the magic and the mysteries of our natural world. Tonight he will talk to us about his second garden, Windcliff. Situated near Kingston in Washington State in the USA, the garden comprises 2.5 hectares, enjoys less than 75 centimeters of precipitation per year, gets no measurable rainfall from June to October, and therefore qualifies as a pseudo-Mediterranean garden in the Pacific Northwest. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us, Dan. We are very honoured to have you with us. And if you'd like to share your screen now, we can begin your presentation.
Here comes Dan.
John, what are you doing? Why are you there? Why can I see John? You've got to be muted. John,
all right, how's that? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Angela? And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? Okay, real good. Well, thank you.
On this pad. Volume, please.
John, okay, this is so funny. This is so funny. Please turn off your John.
I think. Did you take it?
You can't do anything.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, John.
So
You're supposed to mute.
Hi, Dan. Hey, can I give the lecture again?
All right, go ahead. Thank
I'm
goodness.
just kidding. Sorry, we're having technical issues.
Yeah, sure.
I will note that John came to my rescue 6 months ago for the Training Garden Society, and this time he's deliberately trying to muck it up.
Yeah, I think that. I would agree. Okay.
Thank you, everybody. And I'll begin by apologizing for the no-show 6 months ago. And it was a matter of time zone differential that I was unable to negotiate mentally. Yeah, I can't hear myself, so we're gonna have to.
I've got him.
Got him. Okay.
I've zapped him.
There we go. All right. So,
sorry about that.
Well, thank you, everybody. Anyway, and thank you, John, for stepping in. So, those of you who are geographically challenged, Washington State in the upper left-hand corner of the United States.
Okay.
And just so we don't portray the wrong message with this image, we are not considered a red state. We are a very, very blue state, thankfully. So we live in la land politically in this crazy world that we happen to be sharing at this moment in time. In our state itself, if you haven't visited, is geographically and very climatically diverse. So on the west slope of the Cascade Range, which is that mid-rib that you can see going down the center of the state, that's a volcanic range called the Cascades. To the west of that is another range called the Olympics. To the west of the Olympics, right along the coast, you receive approximately, and excuse me for not using metric, about 13 feet of rain a year. So that would be over 3 meters of rain per year. The northernmost rainforest in the world. And to the east, to the far east, the high desert, you're averaging about 11 inches of rain per year. So very hot and dry to the east of the mountains, extremely wet to the far west. But as you can see where I garden, the Kitsap Peninsula is in what we consider the Olympic rain shadow of the Puget Sound area. So that Olympic mountain range essentially catches all of the rain coming off the Pacific in the storms, robs it, and so where I garden, we receive just over 25 inches of rain a year, as opposed to the 13 feet of rain, just 2.5 hour drive to the west. This year in particular, I was curious listening to your personal stories around the world right now in terms of precipitation. Angela, how envious I am that you're in the midst of gales and whales outside your door, because we are the driest we've ever been. We keep a rain gauge here at Windcliff, and since the 1st of May, we have had a total of 1/2 inch of rain. Now, as was noted, we are in a modified Mediterranean climate, so we don't expect much rain during the summer. But generally, towards the end of August, just as the gentleman from Crete said, the temperatures tend to lessen, and we'll get perhaps a week of rain to refreshen things. That has not happened. There's no rain in sight right now, and our soil is absolutely dusty, dry, and hydrophobic. So it doesn't matter how much water I can put on the garden at this point in time. I simply cannot wet it. So those are our climatic parameters. Just to give you an idea of our soil conditions here, before we move forward into the garden here at Windcliff, we're on glacial moraine, which means basically a large pile of sand and rubble. So it has very little water holding capacity. Our pH runs right around neutral or slightly acidic. So not only do we not get the rains during the summertime, but we just can't seem to hold moisture in the soil whatsoever. So obviously it has forced me, but in a good way, to embrace those plants here that will take those conditions and provide a garden that looks relatively good throughout the year. We have to balance that with our winter rains, of course, that start in October and go on through April, but only about 28 inches of rain a year. So we are on a small peninsula, the Kitsap Peninsula. I've started 2 gardens on this peninsula. To the west of it is the Olympic Peninsula, with the largest national park in North America, the Olympic National Park. We're so happy to have it on our doorstep. This very narrow peninsula called the Kitsap is home to 3 major Native American tribes, which will come into play here shortly. My first garden was Heronswood, which is, as the crow flies, about 9 miles to the north and to the west of my current garden, Windcliff. But in those 9 miles, an enormous change in conditions, in gardening conditions, and what I can grow successfully at both places. Just to give you a really quick look at my first garden, and forgive me for including a couple video clips in this presentation. Of course, I had gone almost entirely to videos prior to COVID, and then to our transition to Zoom. And now I have to go back to still images. So forgive me if I've still left some on still photographs in. Heronswood is currently 15 acres in size. It is our first garden that my partner, Robert Jones, and I created starting in 1987. It's now currently owned by the Port Gamble Slalom tribe, one of the 3 tribes that dominate our peninsula. It is primarily a woodland garden, and that's what we became known for. The woodland plants, a high overstory of second growth Douglas fir, and some fanciful garden spaces. It is going forward full tilt under the stewardship of the Port Gamble Slalom tribe. I'm still involved as director emeritus, and it's definitely worthy of a visit. Should you be in the Pacific Northwest, you can make a twofer out of it and visit my garden at Windcliff and Heronswood at the same time. Currently the only botanical garden in North America owned by a native tribe. They're very proud of that fact. It has become a place where 2 very disparate communities have been able to come together, and that's been extraordinarily rewarding. Just another shot of it with our Carpinus hedge that has now become somewhat iconic, having planted this in the early 1990s. So in 2000, Robert and I purchased a property that had already been called Windcliff by the previous owners. Windcliff was an original allotment property of the Suquamish Indian tribe, and we still live within the confines of the Hansville Indian Reservation, which is the reservation of the Suquamish tribe. In the late 1800s, the Suquamish were living communally in one large house called the Longhouse in Suquamish, and the federal government burned that longhouse down and forced the residents off into original allotments. So Windcliff is one of those allotments. As you can see, a waterfront high bank, and probably as the lottery system goes, one of the least desirable pieces of property that tribal members got, because this tribe is primarily a fishing and shellfish based tribe, and we live on a 200-foot bluff away from the water's edge. So a beautiful view, but not particularly worthy of fishing directly outside your front door. In 2000, when we purchased it, this was the view that we had, 6.5 acres. Angela converted that to hectares. Thank you very much. With a fantastic view, but primarily lawn, in an original house that 2 women, Peg and Mary, lived in, and you can see had a bit of a garden around their house. They collected rhododendrons primarily, and as a pastime, they mowed the lawn. I'm convinced that they started mowing each week Saturday morning, and they finished Friday night in time for cocktails. The entire property was a lawn, and as you can see, grass in the Pacific Northwest does not stay green at all during the summer season. It, of course, greens during the winter, but stays quite brown throughout the summer season, as many of you experience as well. And I heard those in England have had that experience this year as well. So for one, I've never been a lawn man ever. I find it the most ridiculous gardening concept that we could possibly have. And 2, I'm a lover of plants. And so this was going to change from day one when we purchased it. And I started envisioning a new property, digging test holes throughout the property, hitting large rocks with every shove of the shovel. And on we go. this year our 25th anniversary on the property, and things have changed dramatically. The one difference between here and Heronswood is I gardened Heronswood 1 foot at a time looking down, and Windcliff had an expansive view off to Mount Rainier, the volcanic peak in the distance with the skyline of Seattle. Mount Rainier, one of the most active and considered most dangerous volcanoes in North America, rises to just over 14,000 feet and dominates the sky. But the last thing I wanted to do when I created the garden at Windcliff was to have people come and say what a beautiful view they have. I wanted them to come and look at the garden and then on occasion look up to see the distant landscape. And so those were amongst my parameters as I set off to make the garden. And as many of you wise, keen gardeners listening today, one of those driving forces as I put the garden together was the importance of foliage. And I continue to say foliage first. Flowers are just frosting. And that is the lessons that I brought from Heronswood to Windcliff. And indeed, that guides me in placing all of the plants. Those plants that have foliage larger next to those smaller, finely fretted, erect versus horizontal. And it is those scenes that tend to hold themselves together throughout the year, certainly during the growing season, but in our instance with plants that remain evergreen during the winter off season, that premise is equally important. Not so much flower at all, the flowers that come and go. And of course, that drives us as gardeners, younger gardeners especially, but foliage is what has really given me has been the driving force in placing plants throughout the garden. So this was the front bluff again in 2000 with the existing house. In the distance, we came to visit the property on weekends for 2 years, stayed weekends here from Heronswood, a long drive of 5 minutes. But just getting to know the property, getting to know the sunrise and sunsets, and understanding precisely what was going to grow here and what wasn't. But the one thing is that I've already mentioned, and I don't mean to harp on it, I was not going to have any turf. And I'm approaching, not quite yet, but approaching zero turf, a mere 5 minutes of mowing a week. We have 3 dogs, and I think they deserve a small bit of grass to roll around on and do their business. So I began planting directly into the turf. Though this is summer dormant, I had killed off as much as I could using vinegar, full strength vinegar, which will kill everything it touches, does not necessarily kill deeply rooted perennials. If those of you have tried it, unless you repeatedly use it, you can then starve the plants and not use either a mulching method or herbicide. I did not want to till nor amend the soil. The reason was primarily is our beloved Puget Sound below. I felt as if I tilled the soil and disrupted the soil structure, that during the winter rains, we simply wash that soil down into the sound and affect its overall health. So I dug chunks of turf. I dug a deeper hole. I put the turf on the bottom of the hole and then planted the plants directly in this manner. And here's a shot in early 2021 as I was moving forward, planting these 4-inch pots in a manner of my mind's eye, thinking to myself, what will they do next to one another? What will they do throughout the year? Will I have height differential? And will I have good textural differences between them? However, my partner, not a gardener, instead an architect, certainly questioned my approach. We had what I now describe as many quiet dinners during this process. But I did convince him that if we just waited and gave it a bit of patience, we would ultimately, hopefully, arrive to the point that I wanted to arrive at. And lo and behold, the next morning, there it was. It is filled in to the point where I was hoping it would be. But as all of us know, a garden is never done. And I don't really have enough time to go into it today. I considered doing that, but in 2024, we experienced the absolute worst winter here in my gardening career. 6 weeks of warm temperatures in November, December, and early January, followed by then the coldest temperatures I've ever had. So this entire area that you're looking at here was essentially wiped clean. All of my structural plants were killed, and many of the herbaceous plants also perished. So I am starting over, and it doesn't look like this right now. That's okay. It's been a real odyssey, a real experiment. I'm more excited about gardening than I ever have been in my life. But if you came to visit now and expected to see this, that's not what you would see. But you're going to see many of the same plants that I've employed originally, just in a much more different fashion. Much of the style, I should say, in English, inspired by my associations with John Greenlee and other people of the same ilk over the years, finally gathering from them the inspiration that I was looking for all along and creating a much more naturalistic style and using ornamental grasses. These, I want to make note of the fact that the best photographs that you will see here in this presentation are those of Claire Takish, and a brilliant photographer from Australia who came to photograph Windcliff for the book that I did on it. The very poor photographs, those would be mine. But this is one of hers with diorama, of course, does exceedingly well. We're going to come back to South Africa over and over again because much of the sunny parts of Windcliff are indeed just a replica of South Africa and the plants that do so well there. Allegia capensis, one of the restios, semi-evergreen for us, not fully evergreen. And then Stipa gigantea, still hands down one of my favorite grasses with that dense rosette foliage that stays evergreen for us during the wintertime, and that diaphanous rise of golden yellow flowers that I can look through during spring and summer. They're still up as we speak. Now, another shot again of the same plants, the Stipa gigantea, the Ostrodaria fulvida from New Zealand, absolutely gorgeous plant. And then Rhodocoma capensis, another restio with a younger Eucharostrata in the middle. The Rhodocoma capensis for us is undeniably one of the most useful and drought-tolerant plants that we can grow. And let me count the many things about it that I love. It's fully evergreen, entirely hardy. I've already mentioned its drought tolerance. It is dioecious, so it takes a obvious one of each sex to create seed, and then it's fire dependent for germination. So it's never going to become a bioinvasive. But on top of all of that, Rhodocoma capensis, if you haven't grown it and you live in a snowy zone, will be flattened by snow, the wet snow that we can receive here in the wintertime. And as soon as that snow melts, it pops up entirely unblemished. So so much going for that plant for us in our climate. I presume that some of you have grown it too and find it equally compelling. Now, I just put in a few grasses, but as my new planting hasn't really settled in yet to the degree that I hoped it would, I'll just make mention of some of those grasses, the newer ones that I'm using now in quantity. Andropogon gerardii, the little blue stem, Schizacrium, Scoparium, Stipa, Gigantea, I've already mentioned, Poaceta, also from New Zealand, and Festuca marii from Morocco, from North Africa. So those are some of the ones that I've smitten with and really using for those of you who are curious, but I don't really have good images of those plants yet. Ornamental grasses tend to take their time in really establishing, and I think that's what makes them ornamental, is that they're not enormous overnight. So I stumbled upon the appropriateness of Kniphophias early on in the garden here at Windcliff, placing some as a lark originally, thinking that they would not be appropriate and would not be hardy. Others I slowly added over time, and then I began making my own seedling selections from them. And I find them so exceptional for our rocky, sandy soils without a tremendous amount of additional water outside of establishment water during the summer dry months. They really do add so much value to our gardens. Here are some hybrids. I do have these images labeled for the names, but please feel free to ask me or email me later if you don't happen to see it. This is one of my seedlings, Plum Island, which is perhaps one of the darkest that we have to date, almost iridescent in purple, and it really is shining this year. These are based on some of those earlier purple-leaved ones. Sparkling Burgundy is one of those, perhaps some of you have grown, which I find very weak in its stem strength, but this one really holds itself up, has a very deep, almost black purple stem and leaf, and is in full blossom right now. It's another thing I love about the Eucomis for this garden in particular is the fact that they really bring the garden back to life in August and September, all the way into early November. This is a portion of the garden on the western slope, again with more Eucomis. These are just seedlings that I have grown. You can see we'll come into the Agapanthus in just a moment, and we'll also look at some Kniphophias that are blended in here. But this planting, which is interspersed with one of the greats of the ornamental grasses, as far as I'm concerned, Molinia cerulea, is an interesting blend in that the height differential changes from late winter, I should say, all the way until November, with shorter, then slightly taller, then even taller yet. And it holds itself together very nicely. This is a shot that I just took 2 days ago, and you can see Eucomis polivenzii is now starting to dominate the height. It's taking over from the hybrid Eucomis, certainly has taken over Molinia cerulea, which is the main player in here. Off in the distance, you see hedychiums, which are seedlings that I grew from a hedychium called Tara. And then I also have Kniphofia thompsonii, the stoloniferous Kniphofia from South Africa, interspersed in this planting. And then this is it in November. You can see the sumac Rus typhina has turned into its autumn glory there, looking to the east, and the Eucomis, even in November, very tall, very still put together, holding themselves up. For those of you from England or from Europe, any of you who have visited Sissinghurst Castle, I saw my first Eucomis polovenzii there, grown up against a brick wall. And so when I planted it at Windcliff, I really did believe it just to be a temporary lark. I didn't believe it would be hardy or appropriate or wind tolerant, but indeed it is just carried forth in the most remarkable fashion. And those bulbs, the size of a basketball, once they're fully established, are just so loaded with water by the winter's end that they simply don't need any replenishment during the summer months. They have what they need to carry forth. You can see the Ostraderia fulvida, used to be called Cordaderia fulvida, off in the distance there as well. But this is November. The Eucomis carries on in my container plants on my terrace. I find them extraordinarily useful as container plants. Those that you can walk away for a long weekend and not worry about, and those that I simply gather up in the fall and put under my eaves, let them dry off during the winter, and then bring them out in June and water them off to go. This is a beautiful species, Humulus. Love this one. You can see I have it growing in my gravel garden. Eucomis autumnalis variety clavata. I think one of the most fanciful, but it really does need gravel in order to thrive. I've tried it numerous times in my sandy, well-draining soils, and it simply still rots. But planted in 4 inches of gravel, it's in blossom beautifully right now. It's a dwarf, very sweet species that I just find so intriguing. But then back to the containers, I use them to great abandon on my terrace, on my tables, and I just find them so good. And also a good pollinator plant as well. The bees swarm to them, the solitary wasps, good foliage, and then of course a good display of flower. But I think perhaps the low maintenance aspect of them in particular is one of the reasons I'm drawn to them. And a good passive breeding subject as well. I simply gather seeds and sow them, find out what I have the next year. The Kniphophias, gosh, fallen madly, deeply in love. Here's a shot in situ on the left, the southern Drakensberg, in 2003 when I came upon this stand of the Kniphofia. Now, obviously, you're looking at that saying, well, yeah, but that is in a dry-ish area, but in also a wet swale. And any of you who have read much about Kniphophias have heard that the habitat that you see them in often throughout South Africa and all the way up into Ethiopia are in wetter places, but that's all relative. And for us at Windcliff, they're not a plant that desires more water. On the right-hand side, you can see Kniphofia northiae, my earliest blossoming Kniphofia, in situ, also in the Drakensberg. You can see that wide foliage hanging into the water itself. But here at Windcliff, if I grow that in a wet situation, it simply rots. It wants that drier, more well-draining soil and does not want summer irrigation. So again, it's all based on relativity, and I find this wherever I travel and look at plants in the wild, and then try to translate them into my garden. That translation often fails, so it's important just to trial. One of my earliest blossoming, tallest hybrid Kniphophias, one called Lola. That name is suspect, I understand. And if any of you have grown this tall, immense 8-foot Kniphofia that blooms for us in May and early June and know it under its correct name, I would love to know it. this was given the name Lola here in North America because it was from a woman's garden by the name of Lola. But it's absolutely fantastic and an incredible way to extend the season of the red hot pokers throughout the season. And I have them in blossom from April all the way into November. So what a great group of plants for us, hummingbird pollinated, as well as numerous hymenids, the bees, but of course in the native haunts of South Africa, it's sunbird pollinated. Interestingly enough, maybe some of you saw this, one of the very few mammalian pollinated plants now observed in Ethiopia with the native foxes pollinating their native Kniphophias by licking the sugars out of the flowers. So I find that really quite fascinating indeed. There's the Kniphofia that is interspersed with the Molinia that I showed you earlier. The Eucomis have not yet risen above, but this is Kniphofia thompsonii, supposedly subspecies Thompsonii. It's a triploid, it's sterile, but it's stoloniferous. So it puts on such a great show and comes up here and there throughout this planting. Totally in love with it, smitten by it indeed. And then some of the later species just coming into flower now or will come into flower later. Kniphofia tysoni, it's a beast. It's enormous. You can see the grass is already gone to seed by the time it's in flower. And the right-hand side just coming into flower right now, a beautiful form of Kniphofia caulescens. This is a new seedling strain that I was given by a fellow lover of the genus that has this swirling fluidity to its foliage, blue, and then stiffly upright flowers. I'm really quite taken by it. Any of you are curious about seeds of these things, please contact me, and I'm very willing to share with you if possible, if we still have a post office. Pardon me, the same plants. This is a repeat slide, but I did want to show you these, the latest of the flowering Kniphophias, Kniphofia multiflora. Look at that. This is November, and we can, on mild years, get away with this plant. If we have an early frost, then we lose that flower. But that's almost like Irameris on the left. That is quite extraordinary flower. A hybrid that I named on the right-hand side using multiflora is named after a plant breeder, Hans Hansen, but I named it Hans Hansen. He's so talented. And we get flowers from that a full month earlier. So in late October, this will be in flower. So yeah, going on and on, but it's a genus that is used to great extent here throughout the Bluff Garden. Agapanthus were growing here at Windcliff when I came. There's one colony of Agapanthus praecox that Peg and Mary had growing, which I couldn't grow successfully at Heronswood. And so, of course, you tend to follow those plants that that thrive in your own garden, and Agapanthus was one of those. I started collecting species, and I started collecting some better known cultivars, and then did passive plant selection, planting out hundreds of seedlings per year, discarding 90%, but keeping the best. Even those rejects, when they all came into flower together, it was really quite beautiful during July and August. I say that, it's like, of course, my child's beautiful. You're thinking otherwise, especially if you're from California. You're looking at these going, oh my God, what a travesty. But for us here, they really do quite well, and they have offered up some really beautiful seedlings. So we started selecting those and numbering, keeping them, then propagating them over time, giving them names. This gives you an idea of some of those that we have selected, the color ranges of those. And they just have been such a good group of plants for us. We've named them after women that are friends of ours. On our wedding in 2013, we handed out labels to all of our women guests, our good friends. We had them go out and put a label next to their favorite one in the garden, and hence they were named for those people. So we call it the Strong Women of Windcliff series, and there are some good ones. And this photo is not photoshopped. We have some really good, rich, deep purples that do put to shame some of those freeway plantings in Los Angeles. And so there. Some companion plants that mix in well with those deep blues. And also I might add good pollinators. So I should say that in English, good pollinator attracting plants, the composites, the aureliids, and of course the apioids, those members of the Apiaceae, the carrot family, those things in particular. But all of these plants really have just drawn a swarm of pollinating insects to us. So you can see Echinops in there, but in this case, Solidago. And I'm definitely going through an enormous Solidago phase in my life right now. This is really one of the best that I've grown to date. Solidago rugosa, Loyster crown, which opens as acid green and then goes to a soft yellow. But many of those, I wish I could just take the camera out right now into the garden to show you the Solidagos that are in flower, because they really do carry the garden at this time of the year, and smothered with wasps and bees, those things that we really don't know their natural histories of, but I find so fascinating that they live around us, but we haven't really gotten to know them to the degree that we have. I do not turn my nose up at annuals and biennials. This was this spring. As I was redoing this new area, I decided, well, I needed something to fill in the space as those plants that were young, those grasses that were tiny, were filling in. So I used just plain old sweeps of Papaver somniferum, and I'll never repeat it again. But I have to say it was a very Wizard of Oz moment when they all came into flower. It was really quite beautiful. I combined it with this member of the Apiaceae, Ligusticum lucidum. Again, this was barren soil, so I decided to plant in this biennial, which gave me a beautiful, finely fretted mound of deeply cut foliage last year, and then a good 6 weeks of flowers this spring, absolutely swarmed with pollinators. And it gave me the opportunity to get these areas filled in with those slower growing perennials. Most of these now have been dug out. They're spent. A few didn't bloom and will bloom next year. But I'll always have a few of this plant in my garden. If you haven't grown Ligusticum, not to be confused with ligustrum, but Ligusticum lucidum. It's European, Eastern European, and just a top-notch plant for flower and for foliage. That first year of foliage is absolutely extraordinary. And some other annuals that I'm growing. Hunnemaniana fumariifolia looks like a yellow California poppy, but it's not. It's the Mexican counterpart to it. Lovely. I happen to have, as a house guest right now, Fergus Garrett from Great Dixter. He's giving a lecture tonight, and he's been spending the last couple nights with us. He saw it in the garden today and mentioned the fact that in southern France, where he did garden, that Hunnemaniana was perennial. It is not for us. It's just an annual, but I get a good 4.5, 5 months of flower from it. It's just absolutely extraordinary. I have it here in the gravel garden with Erigeron glaucus, the sea daisy, one called Wayne Roderick, and that too, not an annual. It's a true perennial, but gives me months of color in this carefree fashion. But the Humaniana is it's part and parcel to this garden. I'll never be without it. Not a big self-sower. I do have to gather seed and then coax that along each year, but worth growing this in a dry climate for that long-lasting display. It was considered fully Mexican until just this year, and now it has been found in Big Bend National Park. So it's now American. It's now partially American, and we're so proud of it. Truly, it's really there. It is. Lovely, lovely plant. And this is a genus I've just stumbled upon in the last 3 years. And wow, has it carried me into some really interesting plants. This is from dry areas of Chile, the genus Nolana in the Solanaceae. This is Nolana reichii, and it blossoms for 4.5 to 5 months. This low prostrate mound. I have it in a gravel garden, and look at that color from the lavender down to almost black in the middle. Wow. Try to find seeds of this. I'm now growing 5 different species. I have this is another one that I have this year, blossoming for the first time this year, Nolana elegans. And to me, it looks almost like a morning glory convolvulus, right? And you can see in the gravel, thriving, loves the heat, and gives me a long progression of flower. So I don't poo-poo the annuals. I love them. They generally teach me so much about the garden, as to where they want to grow and what area accepts those plants less demanding of water than others. I do have water in the garden, just so you know, and I'm just using this to illustrate that point that even though I have a dryland bluff here at Windcliff, and we're not going to go into the Arboretum to the back at all today. Not what I consider Mediterranean, but this highlights the fact that I can have the sense of water, the sense of oasis. You can see the Apuntia off in the distance hanging out over the water. There's aloes, now called Aloiopsis, and yuccas here, camerops next to it. So that sense of oasis next to the water. But the water brings in, of course, a huge number of amphibians, invertebrates, a chorus of frogs in the spring, deafening. Otters come up from the water below, from the Puget Sound below, to explore the water to see if I have restocked fish for their dinner. And so this brings in the wildlife, the birds, which I find so important for the garden. But I have used indeed woody plants. I don't want to give the impression that I have just used herbaceous things here. It's important for me to have things standing upright during the wintertime, some interest. Phlomis, one of those genera that I've used with great abandon, and continue. This is certainly one of the most beautiful in foliage, whirling dervish. And I think it is based on the species Angustifolia. But to where that curliness came from, I cannot say, but I will tell you that I'm growing whirling dervish from seed and getting some extraordinary hybrids between it and other species in the garden, particularly golden foliage and golden stem species. So to be continued with what I'm getting out of this particular plant. It does not hold up well in the wintertime. unfortunately. It looks quite ratty, but in the summer, it's a sight to behold. But some of those do hold up very nicely. This is my favorite of them all, Phlomis margaritae, with these almost iridescent gray-green leaves, soft yellow flowers, which I don't have a picture of, but it does not have the glaring yellow flowers that we see with a lot of members of the genus, but a butter yellow, which is quite lovely. I actually, to give you an idea of how celebrated the plant is, we do have a composition of towers that were done by ceramic artist Dustin Gimbel from LA, called the Phlomis Towers, and underplanted with a litany of Phlomis species as well. But these, of course, are inspired by the inflorescences of Phlomis themselves. And not everybody's cup of tea. You can tell those people who don't like it, they walk by and can't see it, and other people that do like it will note it. It's my garden. I don't care. I like it, and it's been fun for me. So other woody plants that are holding this part of the garden together. I replanted Genista etnensis, which fell during a windstorm. So now I have 5 of these. It's diaphanous. I look through it. It flowers in midsummer. It's fragrant. I wouldn't be without it. I don't understand why it's not in every garden in the Puget Sound area. It's very rare to see, and I simply don't understand it. It's about its ultimate height. And of course, I don't need to talk about it to people, certainly in Italy. This is probably a mainstay in your garden, but I simply wouldn't garden without Genista etnensis, Mount Etna broom. Here it is from our house looking out. This is a specimen that I lost, but I now have it. Seedlings of this planted throughout the garden. But you can see that sunshine that it brought into the house, the fragrance it did, but the fact that I can look through it, while it also provides just a tiny bit of shade from the south sun during high summer. That says it all right there, and really has been helpful for us in the garden. Arctostaphylos, of course, native from British Columbia down into Baja, California, and eastward into Arizona. It's a genus that I've explored more fully now. During COVID, this was my holy grail as I went into the states to the south looking for different Arctostaphylos. This is densiflorus on our patio, our terrace in the winter. The foliage is wet, but what is not shown is, of course, the flowers that come in late winter. They feed our hummingbirds at that time of the year, and then throughout the summer as well. That beautiful flaky bark. There's just so much going for it. Does not want summer water at all. This area does not get it, but you can see it's growing next to the water feature, and gives us that sense of dry next to wet. And some other woody plants as well, combined in, of course, with some of the herbaceous things, but Yucca rostrata, and made collections of this in West Texas, where it's native to, in the most inhospitable areas imaginable where it grows, but such a good plant for us. You wouldn't think, really, from 120 degrees in West Texas and virtually no rainfall from year to year, to the Pacific Northwest, where it absolutely thrives. After the big freeze of 2024, I had decided I was only going to plant Yucca rostrata. That was it. That was all I was going to have. Fields of it, but I have lightened up on that stance. But nonetheless, I still would not be without it. Bootea odorata to the distance there. The Mexican jelly palm does quite well for us. Probably is boring for you, but for us, you don't see it in the Northwest. And then, of course, numerous agaves planted, sited correctly in along the terrace. This is Salmiana times Proto-Americana. There's Bracteosa in front of it, which hasn't bloomed. This particular plant did grow much larger than I was expecting it to, and actually set up a flowering stalk. This does not happen very often in the Puget Sound area. Cytisus battenderii behind it, by the way, along with a restio called Chemamois virgata. But there it is in flower. The number of pollinators on it, including hummingbirds, was extraordinary. It was so fun to watch this bloom. But that is something that you see every year, I'm sure, in your truly Mediterranean climates. And the southern eave of the house, along the eaves where I can have some protection from winter rains, I am growing the cactus here, Trichocereus pachanoi, one of those, and Neobuxbomia from Mexico. They have now almost reached, this is an earlier photo, they've almost reached the eave of the house now and are starting to branch. You can see the Aloe aristata at the base, and Aloe polyphylla is there as well. So as long as I keep them dry during the winter time, they're okay. Now, it's funny, I have so many visitors come to the garden, they see this, they see the southern eave of this house planted with cactus, and they say, you're so lucky to have this vantage, the southern part of your house. And I did some research on the subject, and I found everybody has a southern side to their house. It is uncanny, but it's true. I mean, northern and some southern hemisphere, you have a south side of your house. So, use it to your advantage if you're in a wetter climate, but obviously you're probably not if you're listening to this talk. And then some of the shrubs also along the terrace, the Grevilleas. I so smitten by them. Banksia integrifolia is hardy for us and blossoms. The Grevilleas seemingly do not take a break in flowering and really resent summer water. So on a hot day in August, should we get those rains following warmth, I will rot the Grevilleas off. But other than that, they are totally happy. Grevillea lanidra pinola. This is a winter shot, so it's definitely blooming off season only, but quiets during the summertime. The others just don't ever seem to stop blooming. And of course, our local hummingbirds are native species. We have two species, the rufus and the anas, and they feast on the Grevilleas during the winter season. The anas, this is an anas sitting on her nest, and they are here all winter long. So they are thankful for those Grevilleas. On the other hand, during our Arctic outbreaks, I feel compelled to feed them when the Grevilleas, the flowers might be damaged. I've invited them to stay for the winter. So we do feed them and are entertained by them, by the masses during those cold winter outbreaks. Probably one of the most magical birds on the planet. And so just a parting shot, I think I've used my hour, and I wish we could go on. I'm more than willing to take some questions, and again, email me if you have any specific questions. It's easy to get a hold of me through my website. It's just danhinkley.com or danieljhinkley.com. Ask questions if you're ever wanting to swap seeds. I'm always more than willing to do that. And with that, I thank you for your attention. If you're all still there, and I'll stop sharing.
Okay, what an awesome garden. Just mind-blowing. Let's see, I want to get back to everyone together. I don't know what's going on. Where's my gallery? Multi-speaker. No, not side by side. It's still crazy. Sorry. I can't see everybody.
Hmm.
Ah,
I can
what-
only see.
yeah,
got
I
it.
know. It's weird. Okay, so you get rid of your sharing, please, Dan, because I've still got it up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought that I
Okay,
had. There we have it.
okay,
Pardon me.
there we are. Okay, sorry, just a momentary tech panic. Okay, well, what amazing images, what amazing plant varieties. Just awesome presentation. Thank you so much for preparing it so carefully and sharing so many plant names with us. Obviously, I know that people, it's very generous of you to ask that, to offer that people can contact you directly. So I'm sure that they will. Can we just quickly start with Maggie, who's been possibly looking at some of the questions that have come through on the gallery, on the chat while we while you've been talking. So, hi, Maggie.
Hi there. Yes, indeed. There's lots of very positive comments about how much people have enjoyed the presentation, and I certainly did as well. People are very interested in the Eucomis. I mean, I grow them. I think they're fabulous. Some people asked about where they could buy them in the US. And if you are a US person, there are two suggestions on the chat about where you can get them. But one person, Katya Lebedev, asks about Eucomis that could withstand lower temperatures. She hasn't found anything that survives below -10 centigrade, and she wondered if you were using particular hybrids that were better.
We don't get that cold here, so I can't speak to that. I think drainage is key. I use as my hallmark, Maggie, the garden of Dennis Schrader and Bill Smith in the Hamptons in New York. So obviously they're modified by the maritime climate there, but they grow Eucomis at the base of their house under an eave in a gravel bed without any problems whatsoever. So I think it's trying to keep them dry during the winter and giving them perfect drainage. I think then they will take that cold. And the one thing that we also tend to do here is that we will plant deeper if we think there is some marginal hardiness. Even Melianthus major, it's not very intuitive for us as gardeners because we all know about that crown and we can't bury the crown. But if we plant our Melianthus 6 inches deeper when we're putting them in the ground, we find it increases the hardiness substantially.
So very useful tips, thank you. Caroline Norris has asked, suggested that as your soil is very sandy, you've probably got low fertility, and she's wondering whether you add fertilizers to the soil for the plants or for any particular plants.
That's a good question. And no, we don't add annual fertilizer. And it's again because of the Puget Sound. We don't want that runoff of the nitrates into the sound.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're extremely low in phosphorus and potassium. So I always give a small handful of fertilizer in the planting hole when I plant. From that point on, it is simply mulching and the low bits of fertility that come from that. We don't seem to show a great deal of deficiencies in the plant growth, and in many ways, I'm wanting to slow the plant growth down. So,
Yeah, indeed, yes. There's a couple of questions about watering, about what your watering practices are, and whether you install irrigation for gardens, or whether you just manage with natural rainfall.
well, unfortunately, there's no way we could possibly establish the garden here on natural rainfall. I don't believe in irrigation systems proper because I find them to be out of date a year after you put them in. I see so many people spend so much money on something that is useless in a year's worth of plant growth. What we did at Windcliff is we put in the guts of a water system with an outlet every 50 feet. And so I'm able to use a hose to water those plants that are newly planted, give them a deep watering once every 10 days to 2 weeks during the hottest part of the summer, and then draw back. Now, anyone who's putting a garden together knows that you always have newly planted things in with established things as well, you know. So yeah, some of those plants that are established are also getting a drink in the process. We are on our own well here. We're not using domestic water, but we are also very cognizant of overuse of the water, both for the plants, but also just for the health of our aquifer.
That also feeds into what you were saying about not letting them have too much leafy growth, because that they often withstand the lack of water better, don't they? If they're grown mean. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. There's a question from George Zhang about, do you have any gophers or other creatures to interrupt the process, and how do you live with them?
Yeah, well, we have moles and a few voles, and moles I simply let be. I have never been bothered by them. Some people get very irritated by them. They're territorial, for one, and they're native. So if you remove them, they're simply going to be replaced by another set of moles. And I kind of find the the soil aeration process that they do something that is healthy. I have a very healthy population of non-native rabbits. Rabbits were not native to the Pacific Northwest. They were introduced by hunters, of course, and they've gone wild. We do have coyotes, but the coyote population took a dive due to a disease that they had. It's starting to rebuild, but in the interim, our rabbit population has been extraordinarily high and very frustrating this year. So topping all those ornamental grasses that I've been planting have been taken down to the ground numerous times. So I live trap them and then I send them to England. I'm just fooling. No, I don't really. I take them several miles away and I let them go. Sorry, I know I should be mean and put them down, but they are awfully cute.
They are. We eat them here in Italy. Okay, George Zhang has asked another question about, because at the beginning you talked about how much you love foliage in the garden, and asked about your opinion of Japanese maples and conifers in a Mediterranean garden, whether they have a place or not.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I personally, I don't find Japanese maples work for me in those situations, especially in midsummer, even in the areas. I do have a Japanese maple that was here on the property, and I keep it here out of celebration of the two women that gardened here before. But even that, out of the blaze of the hot sun, will burn and defoliate in the summer heat. And so I find anything that's not going to look particularly good to be something that I just don't want to try to incorporate in the garden as much as possible. I think conifers are totally fine. I love the textures that they provide. And certainly there are those conifers that are designed for drought tolerance, and that the foliage value is very good. So I have no problems with conifers at all in that style of gardening, I think is very appropriate.
Okay, thank you. A question from Andrew Lunt about whether you have a problem with salt burn from the sound, from the water.
Yeah, that's really interesting question, because I thought initially that being over 200 feet above the Puget Sound, that I would be immune to that. And but this was called Windcliff for a reason. We did not name it, and we get the brunt of winter storms that come from the south, and they do take the spray up onto the bluff. So there's certain plants, such as lavender in particular, that simply will not tolerate the salt spray. And this year I've noticed my hedychiums, which I don't consider to be particularly drought tolerant, that they have been burned as well. But for the most part, it's extraordinary that I don't see that damage all that much.
Okay. A question about all the Agapanthus plants and whether you're affected by Agapanthus gall midge or not.
We don't have we do not have Agapanthus gall midge yet. We don't have lily beetle on the Kitsap Peninsula yet, but it is the lily beetle is in Seattle, so it's just a matter of time. But cross fingers. No gall midge, and I, of course, am not bringing any Agapanthus into the garden anymore. Everything that I grow here are those plants that I've raised from seed. So we have a import ban, a high tariff.
Yeah, very sensible. Eleanor Day has asked what the next big project is that you're working on.
In the garden here, or outside in my design process. I don't know which
I'm
way
not
she
sure
was
which
going.
she meant.
So
Eleanor? Just answer.
okay. Yeah, currently I'm working on a very interesting native-only garden in Honolulu in Hawaii, which has been a fascinating process, and it'll be the new Chihuly Museum and Garden, a glass museum and garden, and that's going to be Hawaiian natives only. Here at Windcliff, I'm really converting the bluff really to grasses, just grasses. And Angela, I see that you're signaling. I have a feeling.
No, I'm sorry. I do forgive me. There's somebody here that I just have to say something to. Sorry.
Real, that's fine. So
Okay.
yeah, so I've been a customer of John Greenlee lately, and placing mass orders. That's why he is able to live to the style that he does. And so I'm trying a lot of those tried and true of his, including Cecilaria Greenlee. So I have John growing in the garden, and just having such a blast reinventing the wheel. And it's just been a remarkable year for me as a gardener.
Great.
Do forgive me.
Thanks,
Okay.
But I think we've pretty much run out of questions on the chat. There's just a very personal question from Alexis Billett about whether it's possible to do an internship with you, but I think Angela will send you through the chat so you'll see it, and they can perhaps be in touch with you directly about that. As I say, lots of comments about how much people have enjoyed the presentation, so we thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for the chance at redemption, for being the no-show in the spring.
No. Well, I mean, that wasn't at all deliberate. So don't. So Dan, just we just, in order to find your website, can we just you just put in Dan Hinkley or Windcliff? What Wind?
I think both. I think if you put in Dan Hinkley, DanielJHinkley.com will come up, and that is our website. I do a monthly blog post, and that's gets my pent up frustrated writing out of the way, and I enjoy that process. And then you can also stay up to date as to what plants we're growing and offering. So we do have a nursery here as well, a small nursery devoted to the unusual, the things that you can't find in other places. So yeah, we're surrounded by plants and growing. So
you're a busy guy. But thank you therefore for taking time to be with us this evening. It's been absolutely fascinating. And I'm sure people will be in touch and
thank you so
hopefully
much.
stay in touch with us. Thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and see you next month.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.